Welcome in, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. Thank you for joining. Welcome, welcome. Yes, seeing that attendees number go up. Welcome in, everybody, as you're joining. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. Thank you for joining us, and can't be more excited for this panel. And yeah, we'll get going here in just a second.
And we are live.
Awesome.
Oh, wait, hang on, not quite.
Almost. Welcome to those of you joining. We'll get started here in just a minute.
Now you're live.
Awesome. Well, welcome in, everybody. It looks like we are all good to go, all live. So first off, I just want to welcome everybody to Financial Beginnings Virtual Speaker Series to celebrate Financial Literacy Month. Throughout the month of April, we'll be bringing you experts, vitally important financial education topics. And today's session is no different. But before I introduce you to our amazing speakers, I do want to take a moment to share about who we are, thank our sponsors that made this series possible, and a little bit about what we do. So my name is Alex Jones. I'm the Education and Training Manager here at Financial Beginnings Oregon. And at Financial Beginnings Oregon, Washington, California, and Nebraska, we all exist here to provide free, unbiased financial education across our states and beyond. And our programs are designed for all age groups, and each lesson is facilitated by a trained volunteer. If you're interested in volunteering with us before this session and after or during, please visit our website, financialbeginnings.org, and to learn how you can bring our programs to your community or volunteer with us. We will be doing Q&A and questions in the chat as we go through today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat there. We do have my partner in crime, Jason, will be monitoring that chat to ensure that we see the questions. So please, anything you have to ask myself or our wonderful panel, please do so. Anything else as far as the webinar goes, if there's any other questions or if your chat's not working, please reach out to Jason. He will be out there monitoring it. So next, what I want to do is thank our sponsors. So number one, I want to thank Bank of America, our presenting sponsor. Thank you so much for helping make this happen, and thank you for your belief in financial education. And then additionally, thank you to our other sponsors for making this virtual series possible. Thank you, OnPoint. Thank you, BECU. Thank you, DFR. Thank you, OnPoint Community, or sorry, BECU, the Division of Financial Regulation, Department of Consumer and Business Services, PNC Bank, FP Transitions, the Northwest Credit Union Foundation, State Farm, US Bank, Citizens Bank, and of course, FNBO, the First National Bank of Omaha. And before we get going to, I do want to let you know about some upcoming sessions we have. So we have on April 21st on Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we do have Breaking Down the Chain, Blockchain, Cryptocurrencies, and Tokens Explained. And we have Daniel Dimian here to explain from Albert all about that and give you some tips, tricks, and let you know how it all works. And then we have on Friday, another one I'm super excited for. We have actually some of our panelists or some of our fellows that here at Financial Beginnings Oregon are going to be involved in this one, both past and present. They'll be talking about how does financial literacy impact Gen Z, panel discussion with Next Gen Personal Finance. And that will be on Friday at 4 p.m. So it should be a really fun one. It should be really cool to hear the unique perspective. So please come and join us. And now, of course, I would love to introduce today's session. And our topic today is financial education, facilitators tell all, tips and tricks from the experts. So I'm so grateful for all of them for joining and being willing to share their wisdom with us. So let's go ahead and start this out, and I'm going to do some introductions. So Mary, you're the first one up on my list. So I'm going to have you go ahead and start out. Tell us a little bit about where you work and what made you want to volunteer with Financial Beginnings.
Yeah, I like to be the first one. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited. My name is Mary Vasquez. My pronouns is she, her, and ella. I am the community advocate for Point West Credit Union, a local credit union here in Oregon. I've been serving the community for the past 15 years. I've been involved with Financial Beginnings, I would say half of that. My passion is about really helping, educating, and serving my community in any way possible. I love talking about credit. I love talking about finances. I really concentrate in doing, more conversations with our Hispanic community. So I love doing the financial beginnings, specifically in Spanish. So yeah, it's definitely my passion.
Love it. Absolutely. I mean, Mary's a rock star. We count on her all the time. So thank you, Mary. All right, Chelsea, you're up next. So I want you to tell us a little bit about where you're from and also tell us about some of your volunteering as well over there in Nebraska.
Yeah, wonderful. Hello, thank you for having me. I am Chelsea Castro. I'm a financial representative in Omaha, Nebraska. I have been in the finance industry for a little over 8 years. So I have seen a large gap in the personal finance, financial literacy area. And so when I stepped into a role that allowed me flexibility for volunteer time, I really wanted to find something that filled in a much needed gap and a much needed passion of mine. And so I was so thankful to have Financial Beginnings Nebraska. It's a newer chapter. I think they started in 2020. So I have been a volunteer since just August of 2021. So relatively new compared to Mary. So she's a veteran. I'm a newbie, but she's shared some great advice with me. And so really, I'm just so thankful that there's a program and curriculum out there that is fitting such a unique and well-needed need for us.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Chelsea. All right, and then we'll go on LeGuan. How about you introduce yourself, my friend, looking sharp as always.
Just trying to keep up with you. LeGuan, Warrior Myths Financial Advisor, Eagle Strategies, New York Life. I've been in Portland since 2013. Got into the industry simply because it wasn't around, coming up, high school, college, elementary, none of that. And so being the son of two professional athletes, is phenomenal when it comes to my genetics, but when it comes to financial literacy and empowerment, like it doesn't do anything. And they weren't given the tools that Financial Beginnings is giving to thousands of people. And so I was like, I want to do that. And so as soon as I got here, I hopped on. I may or may not have shadowed for like a year before I got the guts to actually teach a class. But after that, I was like trying to compete with another volunteer to see like who can get the most classes hours each year. And I love it. And so now sit on the board as well, so I can help, with the infrastructure piece of Financial Beginnings Oregon, and continue to grow. We're all passionate and we all have that same mission and objective at the end of the day.
Love it. Well, thank you, LeGuan. And I'm super excited to get started here and kind of just hear from you guys. So I think that's the first thing to do. I'll just start out with our questions. So, Mary, I'm going to start with you here. So just tell us a little bit about your experience so far volunteering with Financial Beginnings. I know that's quite a lot of experience, but tell us just something maybe, kind of highlights things that you really enjoy about volunteering here.
It's been several years, so I've pretty much done it all, even some of the ones that are not quite my favorite, not because they're not good. It's just, like I said, I'm more passionate about credit and, things like that instead of like insurance or stuff like that. But I think overall, it's really about having fun with the material, really making it your own. And really engaging with the audience, right? Because that's where you want the connection to be. And you want them to really not just connect with the material, but also see that, you're there to help them with that journey regarding if they have questions. So really being able to say, hey, I didn't know either, and we're here to learn together, right? And so really putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. And overall, I feel like I've grown with my community as I continue teaching some of the curriculum that at the beginning it made me pretty nervous because, English being my second language, I always use the dictionary to clarify certain things. But, when you really put yourself out there and you're there to help them, you learn together, and it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. I love that. I think that mutual beneficial learning, I think, is just so awesome. And I feel like I used to volunteer and do, very similar things before I came to Financial Beginnings. That was always something that I really enjoyed, was that connection with the people. And then the after part too, where someone, would email me, call me with questions and things like that. And just so rewarding. So I love that. All right, and so Chelsea, I'd love to hear kind of the same thing from you. Like, what kind of drives you to volunteer with Financial Beginnings up there, like, and a little bit about your experience with it.
Sure. So really it's the curriculum. So that was a big importance to me is once I did the training session, really dove into the materials itself, just to get acquainted with them and the message that they were putting out. And I fell in love with it. It was easy to go through. The PowerPoints are great. The materials are great. The handbooks, like the workbooks to give out, like it all fits so well together. And it made it so much easier to take that step into teaching a class. Like I felt so prepared in the materials that like talking about it was going to be a breeze. Like it just fit so well together. Smooth transitions, great information without being overwhelming for the class that you're teaching. So it's really broken down into really great topics and like subjects. So you can really just focus on one subject at a time or one class, which is really great because it's already a pretty fearful topic for a lot of people or students or whatever your class size is. And so if you go in and just spew a whole bunch out, they don't retain it. But if you can focus just on one subject at a time, it's so much easier for your class to understand and really develop questions and thoughtful questions. I think the material does a fantastic job asking those thoughtful questions or kind of letting your class lead where that conversation goes. So I really enjoy that aspect of it in the classroom. So kind of some experience that I've had volunteering, I've been lucky enough to really focus in on one nonprofit here in Omaha that Financial Beginnings supports. And so it's high school students or just right out of high school students kind of in a transition into career college. So really I've been able to develop a really close relationship with those students and that staff there. So it allows just more organic conversations when I'm in the classroom or virtually as well, just to trust, like you build trust with that group and then they share stories and then they're comfortable asking questions. And I love that you may have this great PowerPoint and this great material you're going to go over, but they ask one question and it just takes you down one path, but it's their path that they're on. And so I love that I'm there to answer those questions on the path that they take us.
I love that, Chelsea. That mention of the path that they're on and that path that they're wanting to go. I think that's so uniquely important, I think, when it comes to facilitation and teaching, especially in this type of setting where we're talking to people, like you said, a very sensitive subject, something that not a lot of people are comfortable. I mean, that's one of the main reasons probably why this doesn't get taught on the regular is a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about finances. So if you're willing to go in there and really hear what they have to say and what they want to know, I think that just makes such a tremendous difference. And like you said, you make that connection, and now before you know it, they're friends, not just someone you taught. So that's awesome. And so LaGuana, I want to come to you because you're kind of like, you're in this like unique one where you're a board member and a volunteer. So I kind of love to hear like what keeps you volunteering with us, even though you're also a board member, and some of your experiences volunteering.
Yeah, no problem. I'll address, I guess, the first piece of that. Like, just personally, my opinion, with a lot of folks that you hear in public, like, oh, I'm on the board. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, is it just a position for you to have, like, for status, or are you actually doing something? Because about making the change. And so, getting in and giving direction and bouncing ideas, brainstorming different things that we need to change as far as the infrastructure around our curriculum, who our target market is, etc. That's my drive to being on the board, because it doesn't make sense if there's a bunch of people that don't necessarily have that background for the people that they're targeting to know how to create something that's going to make it click immediately. There's going to be a lot of trial and error rather than, okay, well, if I know how to get from here to the coast, just hopping on 26, why am I going to go down to Salem and then kick over? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's my why for the board membership participation, but also still being in the classroom and teaching it, is because I'm not just about just getting on the board and then, I'm no longer volunteering. I did my time. Like, no, like, what do you still got to perform. You can be an All-American, but that All-American tag can get taken away in any sport real quickly if you don't perform and produce, right? And so I apply the same thing to this. In teaching the kids, it's like, how many more can I have an impact on this year? Yes. 8 years ago, I didn't have a wife and a child. So things have entirely shifted, right? As far as priorities and time. But that's why, like, when I go into the classrooms now, making it known to the kids, it's like, hey, if you don't want to be here and you don't want to apply yourself to learn this knowledge, and sometimes adults as well, because we teach everybody that wants to learn, right? It's like, if you don't want to be here, you're not going to get anything out of it. If you want to get something out of it, then sweet, let's go. And so I'm up there not necessarily lecturing, but engaging with them. And sometimes we may only get through 65, 70% of the lesson, but it was a 65 to 70% that they were engaged in that entire time, rather than going through 100% of the module and they weren't engaged half the course. And so that's how I balance that out with the teachings and just making it relevant to them. Because sometimes the curriculum that they're teaching, just for same as applying to their teachers, their everyday teachers, it's just something that they're not vibing with. So they're not going to try and apply themselves to that conversation. So why continue to stress it, especially when we're only given 30 minutes to 90 minutes to be with them.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I love that. I think that, again, talking about that relevancy and making it relevant to the people that we're teaching. I think something that I love about what we do here at Financial Beginnings is not only do we put volunteers and we're teaching these classes, but we generally care about our curriculum. Like you said, we've got one of our board members here, that's a big focus. I know it's a big focus of me on our programs team, is making sure we update materials, make materials viable for everybody and valuable for everybody. So I love that that's a focus and something that you're concentrating on. And like you said, when you're in the class, if they're not vibing with it, they're not going to pay attention. And we have to find those ends where they care. And we got to get to the meat, the hook, if you will. All right. So now what I'm going to do, Mary, I'm going to let Chelsea take this one first. I'll switch the order up here. So Chelsea, I just really want to hear from you. Why is financial literacy so important to you? And why did it kind of have a calling for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's important to me. Even when I was younger in elementary school and high school, I never had the conversation at home. And it was always just expected to be known without being taught. And I knew that was off even back then. And even as I ventured out of the household, I found myself in the financial field. It really just shocked me that there's such a lack of it. Like, I wasn't the only one that experienced with it. I'm not an exception. I am kind of the rule, right? And so being in that space, learning from my own personal experience, I really there's so much improvement and knowledge out there to share that can help everybody along the path. There's so much to financial literacy. If we can just break it down in digestible portions, we'll all be better off. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. That's why I'm so thankful to have found Financial Beginnings, to give back, to have those conversations that don't happen at the dinner table.
Yep.
And if our dinner table is a classroom desk, fantastic. Let's do it. Let's have it right then and there. So that's my passionate reason for it. There's such a large portion that affects our everyday life. It's intertwined in everything we do, all of our decisions, but we don't have any guidance or support in making those. And so if I can be that, if this program can be that, it's really filling a need that's out there.
I literally love everything you said there. It's just such a huge thing. And like you said, I think that mentioning that it's not talked about at the dinner table, that's so common in our country, probably in the world, but definitely in our country. And that probably is one of the issues as to why this is such a big problem and such a big, glaring issue. And it's kind of funny to me, like when it comes to financial literacy, because we all acknowledge that it's so important. We know the financial literacy, like we need it, people, but it's still on the back burner, right? Like it's not in schools, it's not in colleges, unless somebody wants to pay extra money to take a class or something. But it's just not in front of us. So I love that that's what's driving you and giving you that passion. All right, so you know what, I'm gonna, LaGuan, I'll come down to you. So I know you mentioned a little bit about some of your past history, things like your dad and things like that, and being your reason for enjoying financial literacy. But is there anything else, any other things that kind of call to you, or why you have a passion for teaching this stuff?
I mean, some kind of hit me, not kind of, it did hit me in high school. It's interesting when you go to a certain person's house and to go get the cereal or the Costco cookies or muffins, you walk into another room because it's called a pantry. But, you know, our cereal was on top of the refrigerator and or in the little on the shelf, right? And so not in a pantry. So just little things like that, when you start, like as you get older, especially going to, I would say, a pretty well-off school, you see those differentiators, and you start, your mind starts to spin on, okay, what needed to be done however long ago, because in the grand scheme of things, how much you make versus how much you preserve and or build upon, it's really not that big of a difference between, you know, the $40,000 and the $100,000 that people typically make. Yeah, if you're a millionaire, that's different, but that's not your average person income wise. They're still average people, and that's why people go into debt and why they need to have credit, debt management, budgeting, all that. And so that's what had my mind really start spinning as to like what could have been done. Like I don't even know what the earnings are. Didn't really care to look because it would probably upset me to see like how much my dad made over, you know, 7 years in the NFL. My mom didn't get paid. Track and field, like women weren't getting paid, regardless of whether they were, you know, on the Olympic team, junior Olympic team, like none of that. And sponsorships weren't that big of a thing back then for women. And so that's my why, and that obviously tugs on my heart, and that's why it takes very minimal effort to be motivated to go teach, whether I'm talking about a 30-year-old or a 6-year-old. And so yeah, maybe I don't know, I know that the question, obviously I kind of answered in my intro a little bit, but if there was like another underlying question, I'm definitely happy to answer.
I actually love what you said there. I think that some of those things, because when we think about when we're growing up and we go through these life experiences, things like that stick out to us. Like you saying, that pantry, like I can think about friends that I had growing up. And like I knew when I was at my wealthy friend's house, because if you go to their house, it's like you said, they've got a separate room for a pantry. Every kid has a bedroom. The parents have a den. There's a man cave. It's like, how did you get this? Like, how did you afford this? What did you do to make this happen? And that drives a lot of us, you know, because we want those things, not only for ourselves, but like I have children now. I don't want my kids to ever have to struggle. I want them to experience all the good things and none of the bad things that I ever had to go through. So that's one of those things too, that pushes me in, you know, into what I do now in my career, and why I think I love Financial Beginnings so much too, just in general. I told them, I will tell anybody this in my interview, I said, I will volunteer with you guys regardless if you hire me, because I just love what you do. I 100% not meant that. So 100% with you. I love what you said there. So Mary, I want to come up to you too, because I want to hear what, you know, kind of what drives you and why is financial literacy important to you?
Yeah, so, you know, coming from an immigrant family and really learning the hard way, making, you know, my first mistake, getting a cash loan, you know, with a high interest, and really, you know, learning from what my mistakes, but also understanding like we need this information, right? You know, there's not enough, you know, at school, or especially I like to volunteer, especially with nonprofits. And so for older generation, you know, coming from different parts of the world, not understanding how credit affects right here in this country. And so really very passionate about, you know, you have an opportunity, you don't need to just carry cash all the time, be vulnerable, or even if you never had the opportunity of having a bank account, right? You deserve one, right? If you made a mistake, and you know what, we all make mistakes, right? And so it really opened my eyes about like, we need more of this, we need more information. And so Financial Beginnings had all that information, right? We just needed more volunteers that were willing to really put themselves out there and share that information. And so, you know, the passion is about really focusing and having people understand that you deserve a better future for you and your family, right? You don't need to earn a lot of money to be able to save, right? To be able to buy your home, to build wealth in this country. No matter where you come from or the color of your skin, you have a right to do that. And so really bringing those tools and showing the material that Financial Beginning has for them to understand, you know, and the beautiful part is that it's available, right, in Spanish and in the future in different languages, right, and hoping to have more volunteers that speak other languages that are willing to volunteer and share that information for everybody, because you know it's there. And so that's one of the reasons of many other reasons why I do what I do, and I volunteer at Financial Beginnings.
I love that. I love that. I love that you mentioned too, you know, being the immigration pass and things like that, because I feel like a huge sector of our country that does not get help financially. Like I can vividly remember I was a banker, and where I was a banker at, it was a very, very predominantly Latinx community. So we'd have a lot of customers who came in, and I look like I speak Spanish, but I do not speak Spanish whatsoever. So they'd come up to me, and it was hard to, you know, have that conversation about, you know, would you like to open an account? Like, so even something as simple as that, because it's hard to trust somebody if they're on that same wavelength with you, especially language. Language is huge for that. And so whenever we'd have, you know, Spanish speaking tellers, bankers who were there as well, it always made that so much easier. And it was like they could build that trust with somebody. So I just can't imagine being in a country where you already don't understand the language and trying to talk about something as important as finances. So I love that something that calls out to you and why you do it. And so I do want to touch on a couple people in the chat. I just wanted to highlight. So Kimberly, I love your point that you made here. So Kimberly said, getting told as a child that she didn't need to learn any of the financial stuff because your husband will handle all the financial stuff, so you don't need to worry your pretty little head. Eye roll. I'm with you on the eye roll there. But you know what? You're probably not alone in that. I would imagine there's plenty of other ladies. I'm sure there's been men who've been told that, you know, you're good looking. I'll get you through. So I love that, you know, and having that understanding. So I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll volunteer with us so you can prevent other young ladies from having to go through that same sort of thing. And then Christina, you speak Spanish. How do I learn the financial knowledge so I can volunteer? Well, Christina, connect with me afterwards. Shoot me an email. We'll get you going. I love it. I love it. So the next piece that I kind of wanted to ask here, and I think is just because of the time frame in which we're in right now, you know, with the pandemic, and that's really changed things tremendously in all aspects of life, but definitely in what we do here. So, you know, Mary, I want to come to you because I know that you and I had talked a little bit about this, the virtual versus in-person teaching. You know, I'd love to hear kind of your take on that, like what sort of the differences you've noticed and some things you like about, you know, either one, or maybe you like one better over the other.
You know, if you were to ask me this a year ago, I would say I definitely don't like the virtual side of things. But, you know, past 2 years, then, you know, I warmed up to it. You know, I do like both. You know, unfortunately, there's been cases where, you know, a class gets canceled because of weather, you know, from Oregon, Northwest, you know, it's crazy out here. So, you know, if it's virtually, guess what? Classes don't get canceled, right? And we're able to record classes and share the class, right, for those that weren't able to attend. So I'm up for it virtually or in person. Obviously, I love in person because I'm a people person, and you really want that connection with your audience. You want to be able, you know, to talk to them. And if you have time afterwards, you want to have a one-on-one, or if they feel comfortable with you, then that's a really good opportunity to have that conversation, which is a little different when you're virtually. But definitely, I would say it can be a challenge when it's virtually to be able to engage more with the audience. So really having those, you know, games, communication, make it fun, kind of ask those questions, pick on people as you teach, you know, to just really have the audience, you know, connect, because, you know, maybe they're multitasking, but you really want them to focus. So that can be a little challenge versus if it's in person and you can kind of give them the eye, and then they'll pay attention. But I don't think that, virtually should always stay because it's a great option to have. But I'm really happy that we have some now that are in person. And so I love both of them.
I love that. And Mary, what you mentioned there, I think was kind of a lot of people's thing when the pandemic first started. That virtual side was a little nerve-wracking for people if they've only been doing in-person stuff. And I can tell you, I used to be a trainer at a bank, and that same thing happened to us. We were all in person, and then all of a sudden it shifted to everything we taught was virtual. And this was pre-pandemic. So this was like, why are we doing this? Like, obviously to save money, you can train people all over the country, that sort of thing. But it was really unique where I had to learn all new tips and tricks. Like you just said, there are things where I'm asking more questions. I have to watch for those people who haven't said anything in like 30 minutes. Are they there? Question them. So I love that, right? Like you said, not necessarily picking on them, but you're getting them back involved, reeling them back in. And I think that's so important when we're talking about virtual, is that engagement piece. We really have to be on our game, if you will, because we don't have that. We can't walk around the room. We can't go stand next to their desk and talk and make sure they're on task. So I love that. And so LaGuana, I want to come down to you, kind of very similar question, virtual versus in-person, kind of what's been your experience and your thoughts on that?
In person all day. I love to volunteer in person. Just the engagement is obviously a lot different, especially when you're dealing with teenagers and kids. And so there's always somebody, regardless whether it's elementary school, middle or high school, that's going to be engaged because that kid's just wanting to be a sponge for any and everything. And I love it. But, rather have that be with 10, 20, 30 people. And that's a lot easier for folks when they can see you, even though not necessarily supposed to, touch you and be in the same room as you, And so that's just, I guess, my quick spiel on that. I have done some online trainings. I did my first one at Pacific University, and they had people in the chat box, but we also had a pretty full cafeteria type room as well. And so that was awesome. They had me on the webcam that was up in the ceiling. And so every time I pointed at them, I called them the cloud, and then I asked the room questions as well. And so you can have fun with it too. That never would have been provided for us if we hadn't had COVID. But I'm an old school in-person type of fellow.
Yeah. Well, hey, and there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like that's what's so cool about it. I think, and kind of my hope moving forward is that we will have both opportunities, is that we'll have both virtual and in-person stuff, because it makes it valuable both ways. And we have people who like teaching both ways. So I love that. Chelsea, I want to come to you. Kind of same question. You started with us during the pandemic. So I'm curious if you've gotten to do any in-person stuff. And if you have, kind of what was your, view of that versus virtual?
Sure. So I've actually done more in person than I have done virtually. So that's fantastic. I do think that you have more engagement live in person than virtually. But I think virtual lessons are still really beneficial. I have just found that when I do a virtual one, that I ask more questions as I go through the presentation, because I can't feel if there's a hesitation to ask a question, or if there's a pause or like a facial expression. So I do ask just more questions to try to keep the engagement up. But another thing I like about virtual is I've had people be able to shadow those that are not in Nebraska. So maybe they lived in Washington, D.C. or down in Texas, where we're kind of expanding out there, but maybe there's not an in-person class for them to shadow yet. So those virtual classes allow them to get a feel for financial beginnings, see how classes work. So I do like that aspect on the volunteer side for shadowing opportunities that they would maybe lack otherwise. So I think that's a great way to look at a virtual lesson. But I'm kind of with the other ones. In person is great, but I'm so thankful that we have a backup if needed for the host or for the volunteer.
Absolutely. I love that. Absolutely. 100% cannot agree more. Okay, so I have a question, and this one I'm going to go back to the top. So Mary, I'm going to start with you. I'm just kind of curious, because I know all three of you work in the financial industry and have for a while now. So Mary, what do you think uniquely about working in the financial industry has helped you be prepared to teach this?
Oh, I definitely think if I didn't have that background, I would be doing a lot more shadowing before for sure, at least for the whole year. It is, it has helped tremendously because there's a lot of questions that are asked. I had said before, like you build a connection with the audience, you build a relationship, sometimes too. And so then they kind of feel comfortable and they ask you questions that maybe it's not part of the curriculum, but if you've had that experience because of your career journey and you're able to answer those questions, right? Versus if you don't have that background, it might be a little bit more challenging, and therefore, for volunteers that don't have that background, I know that's one of the fears, right? Which is okay to have, and it's also okay to say, you know what, I don't know this answer, I don't know this, but I'll get one. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I'll get the information for you. And then go from there. But it's definitely kind of helped also kind of let Financial Beginnings know of, specific topics that the community is asking for, specifically on my side, it's non-citizen lending, for example, or, other options of, information regarding opening accounts with other IDs for our non-citizens, our immigrant community. So it's really helped me kind of really share my thoughts and opinions with Financial Beginning regarding other topics. And I think that's also part of the background that I have regarding my experience in my career of, working at a credit union. And so, yeah, I think it has a lot to do of why I do what I do now too with Financial Beginnings.
I love that. Yeah. Cause you're kind of in it. You see some of the issues that you probably wouldn't see if you weren't in the financial industry. I think that's something that I could think back to being a banker. And that was probably one of the biggest reasons why I volunteered in financial literacy, was because I saw that, customers who could have been my dad, could have been my uncle, and I'm teaching them like the basics of credit and how to get a checking account. It's like, why isn't this taught earlier? Why don't people know this? Or why haven't you attacked this earlier? And it's just a lot of times they just don't know. So I love that. And I think that that's a big piece. And I love the two that you mentioned, kind of knowing the hot buttons and the things that are going on around in the industry too. I think that's really relevant. And so Chelsea, I come to you too, because you're not at a bank necessarily, a Prudential. So kind of, how does your background in that, how has that helped you?
Yeah, so I think just being in finance has helped me be comfortable with the terms and everything that's in the curriculum. But honestly, I think just my life experience has helped me more. Just kind of, Mary mentioned it earlier, the mistakes that we've made along the path, whether that be something with student loans or credit or whatever that looks like, we all have a whoops, right? We all have lessons that we've learned the hard way. So for me, that experience has actually been more helpful than just my professional experience. And then I've also, in my younger years, worked always in customer service, client-facing roles, where you never know where that conversation or that interaction is going to lead. And I think that transitions very well to volunteering, because you never know what question's going to be asked, what curveball they throw at you, what off the wall subject they're going to want to talk about, and then trying to answer that, bring it back in kind of full circle. So I think that just customer service profession that I've been in has been really helpful, just navigating those random curveballs that we get thrown as a volunteer.
I think that's fair. And Chelsea, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because my piggyback question, I was actually going to do it to you, was to ask, people who aren't involved in the financial industry, what sort of things would you recommend for them to like concentrate or think about as they're preparing? And some of you already said there was some of that past life experience, right? Sharing your past mistakes and good things too, right? Sharing the good things you've done in your past in the financial industry or on your own finances personally. So I love that. And would there be anything else that you'd offer to some of us, say maybe somebody works in an industry completely outside of banking, but they still want to volunteer? What sort of advice would you give them?
Do it. Absolutely do it. Let's learn together on the way. Again, the material that's provided to you is so great that I don't want that to hesitate anybody that's not in banking or finance in any capacity. But if you're passionate about sharing your experience or learning as you do these classes as well, shadowing is fantastic. The material is fantastic. There's always someone in the financial beginnings community that's going to help support you and help you through any hesitations that you may have. But honestly, if you have zero knowledge of anything in the financial industry, don't let that stop you, because you know more than you think. You personally have been through more than you think. Material is going to relate to you. You can pick the class that you're more passionate about than others to start there. And then you can grow into something that's maybe a larger topic that you have no experience in.
Yes, I love that. And, as Chelsea said there, our team very much, we love to help any of our volunteers get prepared. Shameless plug, I am the education training manager. So if you do need help on getting prepared, definitely reach out to me. Let me know. I never mind jumping in a Zoom room or anything like that and help people get prepped. Mary, I saw you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want you can also buddy in with somebody and do it. I did like 3-4 before I did it on my own. I just had, a couple teammates, friends that are like, hey, you want to do it with me? Sure. And I had, one, and then next week had another one. Just buddy in with somebody you feel comfortable with and have fun with it. That worked with me. Like I said, I did like 3 times before I actually did one by myself.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that piece of the co-facilitation. That's something that I recommend that in any field, but definitely in what we do, because I think it helps with not only the engagement, right? It gets the kids listening. You have 2 different voices, things like that. You can build off of each other, but you can also take a break for a second, right? You don't have to talk. You don't have to talk the entire time. You're not always on stage. So it gives you a little chance, those mental breaks. And a lot of times that can help your teaching be even that much stronger, that much more valuable. So I love that. Thank you, Mary, for putting that out there. Definitely something that we definitely encourage. If you want to come in with a teammate, or, you're like, hey, can you find someone else to help me volunteer with? Sure. We'd absolutely love to do that. And LaGuana, let me come to you on this too. As a board member and as a volunteer, people who aren't in the financial industry, is there anything that you would offer them as advice?
That are not in the financial industry? I mean, just like with anything, if you want to do it, then you'll apply yourself to it. I started volunteering at the same time that I started my career, so it didn't help me whatsoever. I was learning half of what I was teaching as I was teaching it. Or, if you want to do the responsible thing, study the material before you go teach it. And so we all have our respective schedules, right? People have families, people have their work schedules. Some work schedules are wild, but you got to study that material before you go teach it if you want to do it the textbook way. And while you're studying it, you're going to be learning some stuff yourself. Like, dang, okay, I didn't know 7-8 years ago that you could get over an 850. I thought 850 was the top for a credit score, until I saw one of my former linemen in colleges, and it was like a 904, which is stupid. But I was like, I didn't even know you could get a 904, man. And I work in finance. I don't work in credit, but I work in finance. Like that's crazy, but that's awesome at the same time. You're gonna learn things as you go, and there's gonna be some things you learn 10 years from now. Don't shadow for 2 years, but you can shadow for. I can't say you can't shadow for a year, because I definitely shadowed for a year before I was comfortable teaching on my own. But I also didn't have somebody to tell me, hey, go get a friend or a coworker and piggyback this thing, go teach half a class with them. I was like, oh, why didn't I do that? I was 23. I was 23 when so I wasn't even thinking about, bringing in somebody else to try to do it. I was trying to hit it on head on by myself. And so, for as little as that probably helps that question and answer, that's my answer.
I love that you mentioned that, right? Because you didn't have a Mary there to tell you to do that. And,
right.
And I think that's right. And you just mentioned something. I know it sounds basic, but I can tell you, when people volunteer and teach with us, they don't always prepare. A lot of people just like, I'll wing it. I know this stuff. And then you get in front of a class, and then all of a sudden you're like, you lose your mindset or whatever you thought you were going to say. You forgot what you're going to say, and now it's crickets, and you're figuring out how to get back on task. It's like, what the heck do I do? So like you said, it's like a prepared mouth is a prepared mind. Always make sure you do some preparation. And like you said, read through the material you're going to teach, so that way you can speak to it. And when the kids have questions, you know what they're talking about.
I did tell somebody last year, I said, it's okay to sweat. They have deodorant for that. You'll be all right.
Absolutely. It's, I feel like anytime I've ever taught any class ever, that first 5-ish to 7 minutes, like the skin's real warm. You feel like you're sweating. Nobody else can tell, but you have that feeling inside. I think it's just, you got to push through it, because then you kind of hit your groove, and then things get to where they're supposed to be. But I love that, right? Like you said, deodorant's there, deal with it, get past it. You'll get to the good stuff. And so that reminds me of a question, makes me think of something that I really wanted to have you guys share with everybody here. So Mary, I want to start with you. So let's say you're getting ready to teach a class. What sort of things do you do to prepare to teach?
Okay. Apologize, my internet is not as stable right now, but hopefully I don't cut off. So I definitely always do my homework. I can never be ready enough, even if I've done the same, presentation over and over. I always look at it over again. Because I do volunteer with a lot of nonprofits, I like to kind of search who they are, what county they're located, what's their mission. I want to know and connect, and understand a little bit more about them. Based on that, it's how I know, like the audience too, specifically. And then I go through the material again and say, okay, if I have specific questions that I would want to ask, just again, if it's a virtual conversation, if it's a virtual class, then I have some questions that I have already thought about that I want to ask the audience when I'm teaching. If it's an in-person, then same thing. And so those are the things I prepared. I kind of, block myself at least an hour before the class. If it's virtually, just to get ready for it, and go through the presentation and everything. Like I said, even if I've been doing it for a long time, I feel I always need that moment to concentrate on the material, focus on who am I presenting, what's my audience, and be prepared.
Yeah. And Mary, I think something uniquely that I have to call out there. I love that you connect with that host organization, that teacher, whoever it is, head of the nonprofit, and ask about the people you're teaching. Like, I feel like not enough people do that. And that opens up so much for how you're going to talk to them, how you're going to prepare. Like you said, what sort of questions am I going to prepare to ask? Well, it might be a good idea to know your audience, because if you're talking to a bunch of 5-year-olds, it's considerably different than you're talking to a bunch of 20-year-olds, right? But then even understanding people's different backgrounds too, where they come from. Do they come from a generally wealthy area, or do they come from maybe a generally poor area? We want to make sure we're acknowledging those things and know that they may have different views and different viewpoints, and that's okay. But if we're not prepared for that, if we don't have those questions, it's probably going to be really hard for us to do that. So love that's a piece that you do. And then so I just wanted to highlight something that somebody said in the chat, John Wilcoxon. It's also okay in the event someone else asks a question and you do not even know the term or the concept about which they are asking, to let them know that's a new term or idea and you have to ask to tell them more. I think that's one of the biggest things as a teacher facilitator is being honest with your people. Don't just give them a fake answer because you want to fill the space because they've asked a question. It's totally okay to not know, because if there's anything we can count on in finances, is that there's going to be change. So there's always going to be things we don't know at some point. So it's totally okay. And then it's letting them know too. It's okay to not know everything. You're going to learn. So let's figure this out together. Let's Google it together right now. I'll pull out my phone, whatever it is. Let's figure this out. So I love that honesty. I think that goes a long way in building that rapport. So Chelsea, I'm gonna come over to you. Same question. What do you do when you prepare to teach?
Yeah, so very similar to Mary. I do, even if I've done a class before, I do reread through the presenter slides and the notes on those slides. I also like to take a peek at like the workbook pages as well. So if there's a reference in my presentation to the workbook, I have an idea on what that looks like to them. So that way I can more easily answer questions if they have them. I at least have seen the page that we're talking about. So it just helps in a smoother transition in those questions. Similar to Mary, I think of questions I want to ask over that material. I also like to share personal stories as much as I can, whether they're my stories or someone I have known stories, or if there's something relatable, like if it's something I have seen on TikTok or Instagram, or something that's maybe more relatable to them. If it's a trendy video or whatever it is that ties to that subject matter, I like to bring that in because it's kind of a light bulb then to them to tie it together for them. So I like to think of how to share that material, stories, and any trends out there for them to have a better understanding.
I love that. That's really cool. And I like what I think what resonates with that with me is you had mentioned earlier, right, that the material is one of the biggest things that you enjoyed. But you're still, when you're preparing, you're still adding in these additional pieces and like you said, adding in these stories, but looking for those unique ways. How do I connect with these people at their level? Like, you know, like, do I find a cool video that's going on, staying in tune with whatever's going on in the world, knowing about whatever sports stuff happened, even if you don't care about sports, at least knowing who won last night, things like that. So you can have those conversations, that small talk, and it really helps to be able to connect those dots, I think, for people when you're having those conversations. I love that. LaGuan, I got to come to you then too. So same question to you. What sort of things do you do when you prepare to facilitate for us?
Know your audience. You go through the slides and take out the slides that you feel are not going to be appropriate, especially if you've taught there before. And this is obviously something that comes into play after you get very familiarized with this specific school, this class, this and that. Some classes go through all the modules. Some classes, they're only going to get one, or they might get a couple of them. And so based off your talking points that you had prior with them, or that the host, teacher, organization shared with you, you might be like, let me go ahead and take out 34 and 27 and 18, just to make, so that when you go through, you don't have to like click through it. And because I feel like anytime somebody clicks through a presentation slide, anytime, there's a sense of unprofessionalism in my opinion. And some people just don't really care. And so that's how I prep for the classes.
I like that. I feel like the number one thing that I've heard from all of you guys is there's a game plan involved. You guys aren't just getting out there, even though you've done it plenty of times. LaGuan, trying to beat our top volunteers, and Mary's probably giving you for a run for your money there. But you guys are still preparing. You still take that time to look through these because you want to make sure it's relevant and valuable for those people you're teaching. And I think that's so huge, and especially our material has so many activities within it. Like the kids aren't just sitting there listening to you only. There's stuff for them to do in these workbooks. And so I think, Chelsea, that was your point there, was knowing where that's going to connect. So that way, when I come to that point, I know the activity they did. I can speak to that. I can maybe ask them some deeper questions on it. But then we can get to the heart of what that lesson is trying to get to. So I think that piece is huge. We're starting to get a little low on time here. So there's a couple questions I wanted to make sure that everybody got to hear. So this is kind of my question, and LaGuan, I'll start with you. If there's just one thing, like a tip, trick, something that you would offer any volunteer as they're getting ready or getting started volunteering with us, what would that be?
Say blitz, do a blitz. You're not, if you don't know football terminology, like just go all in with your take a month and shadow like one time a week. Shadow 4 times, you should be ready to go. It'll give us more pitchers in our bullpen, which will be awesome. I know that's a baseball reference. That's not a football reference. But just do a blitz of that knowledge and information, so that because it's not going to necessarily change anytime soon. The curriculum and the modules get adjusted a little bit each year, every other year, but nothing drastic. And so that would be my 2 cents. Don't in air quotes waste the next 11 months when you could be ready to go come start of next school season, come the fall. You could be ready to volunteer. And there are some things over the summer that go on, but those are more so with other organizations throughout the community, which is even more a little bit informal than an actual classroom. So that might be something that attracts you, which is a reason to get approved and ready to go ASAP.
I love that. And so, and when you maybe think there too is when it thinks about the shadowing pieces, we have opportunities that come up a lot. I know Jason was mentioning in our chat that we have our community drop-in classes where a lot of times a team up in Washington, some of our volunteers in Oregon, they volunteer and they teach a class virtually, but they have it knowing that future volunteers or current volunteers are going to be joining just to kind of see how it goes. So shadowing, if you will. So if that's something that might be interested to you, or maybe you're thinking about volunteering, you're like, I'm not quite ready. I want to see what this looks like. I want to shadow like they've all been talking about. Please check out those community drop-in classes. We do send out, in email blasts and things like that to let you know when those are coming up. So definitely keep an eye out for those because those will definitely help you to get prepared. And John, I'm sorry, I'm not good with hockey outside of the Mighty Ducks, so I have no hockey references, my friend. And so, you know what, I would love to hear too, when you guys think about this, the tips, tricks, and Laguan, I want to kind of come back to you on this one. Have you ever had anything in a class that threw you off? I'd just be curious to know.
Not that it threw me off necessarily. It was just more so like the disrespect. And so like if I'm going in and teach the Winterhawks, right? We're in Portland. I'm in Portland. So the Winterhawks is semi-pro, pro hockey team. There you go, John.
There you go.
I literally start, if I know that I'm talking to some student athletes or a majority of the crowd of student athletes, I literally say, if I see your phone, you have 100 push-ups when I see your phone. Done. And so anyway, I was in a classroom though with the one that threw me off, and there was this gal, and she was kind of sitting in the back, and I was like, hey, if you don't want to be here, that's perfectly fine. Like, I would just like you to step out into the hallway because like your vibe is just not, it's not going right now. And the teacher was like, I love this. This is awesome. Because you never know how to, for a second, I was standing there like kind of just stuck for like 6 seconds. That's a long time when you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And, but I demand that, the respects of I'm taking time away from one, my business, my family. I'm not getting paid to come out here and do this. I'm doing this out of the love for my heart. So the least you could do is at least give me that respect. You don't have to pay attention, but sitting here on your phone and you got the headphones in and all that, mad disrespectful. And I don't necessarily play that. So that did throw me off for those 6 seconds.
Yeah. I like it. Right. I'd imagine something like that probably will happen or could happen to any of you. And I like that, right? Just being honest. Hey, if this isn't something that interests you, feel free to step out. I love that. And so I guess, Mary, I'm curious to hear from you, as we're getting close to the end here. Has there ever been anything that's throwing you off in a class or anything that's ever caught you off guard?
Yes, definitely. I was talking about, certain terminologies versus Spanish and English. Sometimes, Latin America, there's different terminologies that people can just throw and say, you're like, what does this mean again? I'm like, sorry, let me see if I get this right. And it's been more than one occasion, and it's okay. It's about really asking questions and I'm like, oh, what do you mean this? Or let's find out more information on what you mean. Also, when somebody comes and or says, if they had a bad experience with maybe a bank or a credit union or something went on, and at the moment it's kind of a bad conversation going on, and it's how do you bring it up and kind of flip that to a good conversation. It's like, okay, let's give a financial institution a second chance, right? And so those are some of the conversations that sometimes throw me off, but I'm used to those, and I always say that those are the moments that those challenges are good for you. It's a good reminder of like, okay, I can do this. Let's handle this correctly. So those are been like the little things for me. Definitely terminology regarding Latin, Spanish and English, and kind of thinking in both at the same time and seeing if I'm saying it correctly and confirming it, and it's okay to confirm it with them if we have the same terminology.
Well, and so many things we all talk about, the way we talk about things, the slang we use, it's all over the place, especially in finance is no different. We got so many different acronyms and nicknames for things that I think a lot of times that can be hard for us. So we have to make sure we're concentrating on that and letting the students know, hey, this is what that means.
Right. Definitely.
Love that. Awesome. Well, then, we got just a couple minutes left. Chelsea, I want to hear from you. I want to hear if there's ever been anything that's thrown you off in a class.
Yeah, so I would say just be prepared for some oversharing from the students that you may be teaching. We ask some personal questions or their experience with something, and some of them are very comfortable in sharing some of the details of those questions. So just be prepared that you may get some of that oversharing, and just be, thank you for sharing that. But we're going to bring it back to this, or let them have a few minutes of time to share that story. But, let's try to pull it back in as respectfully as we can in that situation. But to me, if they are oversharing, they're trusting me in that presentation. So let them have that little moment, bring it back in. So just be prepared, especially if we're, high school age kids, sometimes will overshare and elementary kids can overshare. So just be ready to kind of pull that back in, but you'll hear some fantastic stories.
Yes, you will. There's very little filter to no filter when it comes to the kids and what they're willing to share. Thank you for that, Chelsea. And LaGuan, you had your hand up. I wanted to make sure I got to you before we get to the end here.
Yeah, just given the climate, and I'm surprised this didn't come to my mind first and foremost. Was in a classroom and was speaking to an individual, and we were talking about credit, pulled out credit debit cards, and I was like, "Oh, girl, this is like, you can't tell the difference because it doesn't say." And then immediately it was like, "I'm not a girl," and so you have to be conscious about that, because that was one of those like slap in the face, let me back up. Okay, my apologies. But again, knowing the climate that we're in right now and forever moving forward, how you approach people in your wording and stuff like that, because obviously it was super casual and from my perspective, but that doesn't matter. It is what that person identifies as. So you just gotta be on your have your conscious radar up about your verbiage. And I saw that in the chat earlier. The verbiage is huge when talking, and so especially when you want to respect everybody as much as you can. So I just wanted to be humble and share that, because I feel like everybody's gonna make a mistake at some point, but it was obviously not ill-willed. So.
Yeah. No, and LaGuan, I appreciate you being willing to share that, because that is something that's a very real world thing for us. And, it's the way we react to it, like you said, it's like, let me take my foot out of my mouth. I sincerely apologize, and let's move forward. But I love that. I love you pointing that out. And thank you for sharing that. Gosh, we're already out of time here. It's been amazing hearing from you guys. Number one, I want to thank you, LaGuan, Mary, and Chelsea for being here, sharing all that you shared. Amazing stuff. Again, I got to throw out a shameless plug. This is something that we're looking to start doing potentially. Financial Beginnings Oregon doing what we call communities of practice, where we'll have some of our volunteers come and talk about things that they're doing, and could be tips, tricks, could be experiences, whatever it is. We're going to look at doing some of those in the upcoming months. So keep an eye out for those. But other than that, thank you everybody who attended. I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your day and a fantastic weekend. And thank you so much.